Hello P6, welcome to Monday's Maths lesson. Now to begin with today we are going to start by revising our long multiplication calculations. We've done lots of these over the last few months, but let's take a moment now to do one together. So the page that you're going to download looks like this. And let's do the first question together. Let's see if we can remember how to do long multiplication, and then you can go and do the rest of the questions by yourself. So in question number 1, we have got 353 and we're multiplying it by 39. Now, we don't know our 39 times tables. So what we have to do is take our 39 and break it down into two separate parts. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply, first of all, by 9. And then once we've multiplied by 9, we'll multiply by the digit, which is in the tens, which is the 3. But it's not 3, it's 30. So we're going to be multiplying by 9, the number in the units, and then we're going to multiply by our tens digit, the 3, which is 30. So to multiply by 9, we're going to imagine that 3 isn't there. We're going to do 353 times 9. Okay, so think of your 9 times table. So 9 times 3 is, it's going to be 27. So put down your 7 and carry the little 2 over into the bottom of the next box. So 9 threes are 27. 9 times 5, 9 fives are 45, and 2 more. That's going to be 47. So put down your 7 and carry the little 4. 9 threes are 27 again, but this time I have to add the 4. 27 add 4 is 31. So what does my answer say for the top line? 3,177. So I've multiplied by 9, now it's time to multiply by the 30. What's the first thing, P6, I have to do to multiply by a group of 10? What has to go in here, can you remember? It's that 0. I have to put in the 0, and now I'm going to multiply by the 3. So I'm going to do 3 threes, 3 fives, 3 threes. So 3 times 3 is 9. So we'll write it down there. 3 times 5 is... it's 15. How am I going to write down that 15? Well, the 5 has to go there. Where am I going to put the 1? P6, can you remember? It has to go up high, doesn't it? It has to go up beside this 3. That's the next number to be multiplied by. I'm not putting it down at the bottom because I've already got carried numbers down here at the bottom. So 3 times 5 is 15. The 5 goes there, the 1 goes up high. Then I've got 3 times 3. 3 threes are 9. Add 1 makes 10. How would I say that number? What does that number say? 10,590. And then you've done the hard bit. Now we just have to add it up. So 7 add 0 is 7. 7 add 9 is 16. 1 and 5 and 1. 7. 3 and nothing. It's going to be 3 and 1 and nothing else. 1. How would I say that answer, P6? 13,767. So don't forget, when you're doing your long multiplication, we start by multiplying by the units and then we multiply by the tens. Don't forget, when you're multiplying by your tens, put the 0 into your answer first before you do any multiplying. So that is your warm-up for today. Now, last week we were thinking about decimals, and we were thinking about hundredths, and we were thinking about tenths as well. And last week we practiced using money in particular to help us think about using hundredths, because when we use money like £2.75, that decimal point that we can see is all to do with our hundredths. When we're looking at hundredths, we've got 2 numbers after the decimal point. Now, what you're going to do today is we're going to have another think about hundredths. We're going to relate them to tenths, and then today we're going to practice doing some adding. So let's start having a think about our decimal numbers. Let's look at these decimal numbers. Well, first of all, can we remember how to say them? What would I say if I saw that decimal number? What does that number actually say? It's 0.42. Remember, we don't say 42. We say each number separately. The only time that would be different, if I had a pound sign at the start, then I would say it as 42. but without the pound sign, I say each number separately, 0.42. Now, what does that 0.42 actually mean? Well, I don't have anything in the units. I've got my T. Remember, the T stands for tenths, and the H stands for 100ths. So if I thought about that 0.42, well, I could think about that 42 in two different ways. I could think of it all as being hundredths. I could take the tenths number and the hundredths number together, and that means that I've got 42 hundredths. So I've got 42 out of 100 parts. Or I could think of the two of them separately. I could think of the 4 as being 4/10ths, which I could write like that. And I could think of the 2 on its own as being 200ths, which I would write like that. So I could think of it as the 2 together being hundredths, 42 hundredths, or I could think of it as being 4/10ths and 200ths. If we think about money, that makes sense, because I could have, if I'm looking at hundredths, well, hundredths of £1 are the 1p's. So I would have 42 1p's. Or if I thought of it as money for 4/10ths and 200ths, well, tenths, £1 and divided into 10 parts, that's our 10p's. So I could have 4 10p's and 2 1p's. 42 hundredths or 4/10ths and 200ths. Once I get into my bigger numbers, so I've had my 1.19. Well, now I've got one full unit. And again, I could think about this 0.19. Again, I could think of it all as being hundredths. I could have it as 19 hundredths. Or I could have it as being 1/10th, 1/10th, and 9 100ths. Those are the same as each other. 19 hundredths is the same as 1/10th and 9 hundredths. They're the same thing. And in that one, of course, as well, I've got one full unit. So I better not forget about it. What about in this one? 7.84. Well, the 7 means I've got 7 units. 7 whole things. 0.84. Again, I could put the two of them together. So for my 0.84, I could think of it as being 84 hundredths. Or I could break it up into 2 parts. So I could say that I've got 8/10ths. And I've got another 4 100ths. So I can look at the two together, or I can look at the two separately. Now, I wonder what we can see in these pictures. Today we're going to be practicing doing some adding. So let's see if we can do some adding with our different colours that we've got here. Because on these 100 squares that I've got in front of me, I've got 2 different colours. I've got some blue squares and I've got some orange squares. Now what we can see is that each of our bigger squares is divided into 100 parts. So there are 100 little squares. How many of them have been coloured in blue? Well, I could say that 3 out of the 100 have been coloured in blue. How many have been coloured in with orange? I've got 4 hundredths. Now, what would I get if I added those together? How many have been coloured in all together? How many out of the 100 all together have been coloured? Well, it's 7. When I add fractions, I add the top numbers. If the denominators are the same, which they are, hundredths, that stays the same in the answer, and I add the top numbers. 3 add 4 makes 7. Now, what if I was to write that as decimals? Well, what would 3 hundredths be as a decimal? It would be 0.03. What would 4 hundredths be as a decimal? It would be 0.04. And if I add them together, 3 add 4 makes 7 hundredths. So that's going to be 0.07. Now remember, with hundredths, there have to be 2 numbers after the decimal point. It wouldn't be right to say 0.7. That would be wrong because that would mean I've got 7 out of 10 parts. Remember, that number is the tenths digit. It's not 7 out of 10 I've got, it's 7 out of 100. So I need to make sure that there are 2 numbers after the decimal point. What could I say in this next one? How many out of the 100 have been coloured? Well, we'll start with the orange this time. How many orange ones are there? There's 9 out of 100. So we could write that as 9 100ths, or we could write that as 0.09. What about the blue? How many blue have I got? 2, 4, 6. So I've got 6 100ths. I could write that as a decimal, 0.06. What do I get when I add 9 and 6? 9 add 6 makes 15, doesn't it? So I've got 15 100ths. Now what will that become as a decimal? Well, I've got my 0 because I haven't coloured in the whole thing, and I've got my 15 goes after it, my 2 digits for my hundredths. I don't need to put a 0 in front of it. 15 hundredths. I could think of that as being 15 hundredths, but of course I could also think of that 15 hundredths as being the same as 1/10 and 5 more hundredths. 10th hundredths, 1/10 and 5 hundredths. Let's do one more. We'll start off with the blue one this time. How many blue have I got? Well, I've got 2 rows of 10, so there's 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 hundredths. So I've got 25 hundredths. How would I write that as a decimal? 0.25. What have I got this time for my orange? Well, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I've got 15 100ths. Add them together. What's that going to be? Yep, 25 add 15 is going to be 40 100ths. So 40 squares have been coloured in. Can we finish it as a decimal then? So 0.25. 15 hundredths is going to become 0.15. And when I add them together, I get 40 hundredths. How will that look? 0.40. Now, in decimals, I could write that answer that way. It would also be okay to write the answer without the extra 0 on the end. 41 hundredths is exactly the same as 4/10. Because I don't have any extra hundredths, I can actually leave off that 0. Now, it's not something to worry about for today, but it's something we will be having a think about over the next few days. Adding hundredths is nice and straightforward, and sometimes you're going to be doing some adding mentally, just like we were doing there. But sometimes if the numbers get a little bit bigger, P6, then what we will start doing instead is we will start writing down our calculations as vertical calculations instead, just like we have here. Now, let's take a moment to have a think about some of these questions. So, adding decimals is no harder than doing an ordinary adding calculation. The only thing we have to remember is to make sure that we put our decimal points in, and that when we're doing it, we keep our decimal points in a straight line. So, if I was given this question, 0.36 at 0.41, and I go to add it up, well, there's my tenths, there's my hundredths, there's my units, and I've got the decimal point in between them. So let's add it up. We start with the hundredths. We always start at the right-hand side. So 6 add 1 is 7. 3 add 4 is another 7. 0 add 0 is 0. So how would I say that answer, P6? 0.77. I've got 77 hundredths, or 0.77. Let's start with that 0.77, and this time we're going to add 0.38. So again, I've got my decimal points. I've remembered to put my decimal point already in for my answer. This one's a little bit more tricky. Let's do it. So 7 add 8 is, it's going to be 15. So as always, we would write down our 5 and we would carry the 1 over into the tenths. 7 plus 3 plus 1. So 7 plus 3 is 10, and 1 more makes 11. So put down the 1, carry your 1. 0 and 0 and 1 make 1. How would I say that answer, P6? 1 point, say the number separately, 1, 5. Again, the numbers could get even bigger. 4.75 add 3.84. Now, there's something I have to do before I even start. What else do I still need to do? I need to do something in my answer line. What should I do? I should make sure I put that decimal point in. The decimal point must be there in the answer, because without it, it will be wrong. So let's start by adding our hundredths. So 5 add 4. 5 add 4 makes 9. So I've got 9 in the hundredths. 7 add 8 is, it's 15. So put down your 5, but carry the 1 over into the units. 4 plus 3 plus 1 makes, 8. So what does my answer say? 8.59. Without that decimal point, it would say 859. That would be a very, very different answer. Now, P6, for your challenge today, for your main written activity today, you are going to have a go at this page. In the first part of it, you are going to be doing some work where you are adding mentally. So you're going to be working out this bit, looking at these signs and doing a lot of mental work. From number 2 on, you're going to be writing out your written calculations. And number 4 and number 5 are all to do with these amounts of money. So you're going to have a go at that today. Now, if you need to, if you find adding difficult, why don't you go onto the website and there's a 100 square that you can download to help you with your adding. But everybody is doing that activity today. If you get that done, then for your extension task today, I want you to choose a chili challenge level. 2 levels to choose from today, a moderate or a super spicy. I've given you 5 different types of fruit. We've got lemons, apples, strawberries, oranges and bananas. And we've got some shopping lists, and I want you to go and work out for me what price you would pay if you were buying certain things. There are some challenge questions in there. Do your very best. Once you've had a go at that, for today's reasoning challenge, we've got something that's to do with small differences. These questions are all very similar, but they're not exactly the same. Can you find out what's the same about them, but also what's different, and then go and work out the answers for the 3 questions. P6, do your very best. I know it's tough being at home. Home learning is not easy, but you're doing an amazing job. Keep up the good work and do your very best today. Good luck.